Hello and welcome back to The Meeting Point, episode 42.
It's round the table.
What?
It's round the table.
Oh yes. I was trying to be serious. Hello. Hello and welcome to Round the Table, episode 42, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. So this week we'll be discussing farming, which is a very unusual topic by Meeting Point standards. We've never discussed farming before, and it was a very interesting week. So this week we've got an interesting word for you, and we've also got some what's the difference. So should we do some what's the difference first?
Yeah.
Okay. The first what's the difference is one that I think we've done lots of times before, so we'll do it again. Remember and remind. Extra points, Ursula, if you can tell me the difference between remember and remind.
Well, when you remember,
Mm-hmm.
you remember something.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can do it on your own.
Yeah, but remind is someone telling you something, what
That
to
is
do, for
correct.
example.
It's making somebody else
Remember.
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or it could be something can remind you. You can have a reminder,
Yeah.
like tying a knot in the corner of your handkerchief.
I never got that.
Well, that's apparently a thing that people used to do.
Yeah, but I don't understand
And then you
how
take
it
out
works.
your handkerchief and you go, oh, look, there's something I have to remember.
Yeah.
And in theory, you remember the thing. Or you can just write a list.
Write it in your hand.
You can write it on the back of your hand. That's a good idea, yes. Or post-it pads. Write things on post-its.
You like
And-
that, don't you?
I do. I like a post-it. There's many of them around here with interesting things that I have to remember. Strange phrases that I don't know what they mean. I had one once when I was in London, and it said phone Bill. And I knew this bloke called Bill who lived down in South London, and I thought, why do I have to phone Bill? And I couldn't remember what it was I had to phone him about. In actual fact, the reminder was for me to pay the phone bill. I didn't have to phone Bill at all. It was phone bill.
Very good.
True story. Anyway, the next one in the what's the difference is produce and product. Products. Last week we were discussing produce and produce,
Yeah.
the noun and the verb, yeah? But these are both nouns. So produce, I don't think you'll know this. This is a complicated one.
I don't know. It's the production.
Yeah. Production might be connected to it, yeah. If you are a farmer, for example, and you grow some crops and you take them to the market, normally that's called produce. And I think produce, things you grow, and products would be things you make.
Oh.
I think there's more manufacturing in products. Either way, it's always called produce. When you're talking vegetables, they always use the word produce instead of products. So I would say that's the context it's always used in anyway. Products that are generally things that come out of factories and things like that. But anyway, generally speaking, farmers have produce. They sell produce when it's eggs and courgettes and tomatoes and things like that. They always use the word produce.
Okay.
So anyway, that's produce and products. Interesting pair of words. The next one is wild and savage. So I tell you,
Yeah.
savage is more violent.
Yeah.
Because if you could talk about a wolf or a tiger, you could say it's really savage because it's killing things. Wild is just an animal that is not like on a farm. It's in the forest or in the mountains. Yeah.
It's in the nature. Yeah.
In nature, that's a wild animal. And if you saw a wild goat, for example, you've got the Iberian ibex, I believe. That is a wild animal, but you wouldn't call it savage
Yeah.
because you don't generally get attacked by goats. They don't savage you, and there's not a lot of blood involved when you get attacked by a goat.
Yeah.
So savage is describing violence in a wild sort of way.
Yeah.
But animals are in the wild, and it's pronounced wild as well, not willed. Some people think it's willed. It's wild, and so savage is more violent. You can have a savage attack as well. Even in crime reports, there's a savage attack. So it's not the same as wild, at least not for me. And very similar, but on the other end of the spectrum, we have domestic and tame.
Maybe tame are dogs and pets that you have at home living with you. And domestic.
Yeah, but they're domestic as well.
Yeah, but domestic, they are more used to being in contact with humans, but not necessarily live with them.
They might, yeah, they might not. I suppose they could be domesticated and not tame. Yeah. It's to do with the amount of time with
I
people. And if you caught an animal in the wild, you could tame the animal. Yeah. But that's not necessarily domesticating it. Domesticating it is for many generations, like cows and horses that come from a wild variety, but they've been with people for thousands of years. They've been domesticated to live alongside us, yeah?
Okay.
So dogs are domesticated animals. They were domesticated thousands and thousands of years ago, long before farming. They were one of the earliest domesticated animals. But tame really refers to one animal.
Yeah.
Because I suppose you could have a domesticated dog that's not at all tame, because some of them are quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And they're not trained very... So tame is a bit like to be trained as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some animals can't be domesticated. Apparently elephants are not domesticated. Even though you'd think that they are trained and they work with people, yeah. Apparently they don't breed them in captivity to make more domesticated elephants. They have to go and catch a baby elephant and steal it from its mother and then train it. So each individual one is tame.
Yeah.
But as a group, they're not really domesticated. Whereas horses, they were taken from the wild thousands of years ago, and they just make more horses from tame horses, so eventually they're domesticated. And of course, we can use domestic to refer to things at home as well.
Yeah.
And one more, which is a very strange one, is melt and thaw. A lot of people use melt instead of thaw, because we don't use thaw very often. Melt, if you take ice and it turns into water, you melt it, yeah? It melts.
Yeah.
If you have a frozen chicken and you take it out of the freezer and leave it, it thaws. It doesn't melt because it doesn't go from chicken into liquid chicken. Yeah, not like ice turning into water.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't become chicken soup. It only thaws. So frozen things thaw if it's something kept in very cold temperature. So the polar ice caps are melting. The ice is turning into water. But the tundra, the permafrost in Siberia, is actually thawing. It's not melting. It's
So it changes the state, yeah, when it melts. It changes from solid to liquid, for example.
Yeah. But generally things that we keep, like food basically, thaws.
Yeah.
We often use defrost as well.
Yeah.
Which is a kind of a new invention, because we had frost that accumulates in the... Normally you have frost in the...
Freezer.
Well, previously you had it outside. Like frosty mornings. Like last weekend we had frost when we went out and all the cars were covered in that white stuff in the morning. That's frost. And then when you had freezers invented, they referred to that like it's like snow that collects inside the freezer. And they called that frost. And then you had to defrost your freezer. You don't do it now because freezers have some special secret mechanism. Automatic defrosting. I don't know how that's done. But you used to have to defrost the freezer.
Yeah.
And then people started using that for the food that they took from the freezer, and they said they're going to defrost the chicken. Some people say defrost, some people say thaw.
What do you say?
I might say defrost, actually. I shall change that, and I will use Thor in the future.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the interesting, no, not the interesting word, that is the what's the difference. Are you ready for an interesting word? Say yes. Woohoo. More enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, great man. Interesting word. And the interesting word is breed, because we were talking about different types of animals on farms. If you're talking different types of dogs, like Alsatians, Chihuahuas, Poodles, Dalmatians, came up in conversation, Golden Retrievers, they are breeds of dogs. They're not races. People often get confused.
Yeah.
They think that should be race.
Yeah.
We use race for
humans.
For humans. Yeah, we have the human race, but people often refer to races of humans as well, like the Oriental or the African. And it's not very politically correct these days because it's not actually a real thing. People are people, and it's just a human race. We're all interchangeable, really. We just come in different colours, but we're not really different races. So people don't like that, referring to people as different races anymore. So with domesticated animals, we have different breeds, okay? Now, you don't use those for wild animals because they're different species, okay? Because if you're talking about different types of seagulls, for example, seagulls came up in conversation this week. You've got the black-backed gull, the herring gull, the Arctic tern, if they're gulls, I'm not sure. Black-headed gull, Steven Seagull. Yes. Very good. Anyway, they're not different breeds because people haven't made them. All the different types of dog have been created by people. Yeah, the same as the different breeds of cow. Your Herefords and your Aberdeen Angus and your Guernseys and Jerseys, and of course the wonderful Devon Red. Mm-hmm. Check the picture in your books, everybody. That's a Devon Red on that page. Anyway, they're breeds of animals. And then you can use breed as a verb as well. So animals breed, meaning they reproduce. Right? So they're sort of intransitive breed, but then there's a transitive breed as well, where you can say, I breed animals. Yeah? So some people breed dogs. It means they produce dogs. Yeah? They make new dogs. And they are dog breeders. So to produce these things, you have to use selective breeding. It's called selective breeding when you choose animals with certain traits, certain characteristics that you want to be in the next generation. So you select which ones are going to breed and which ones are not allowed to breed, and that's how you make new breeds. Yeah? So that is called selective breeding. For people, you can often hear this phrase to be well bred. Bred, B-R-E-D, with only one E, is the past participle. So a well-bred person is someone high up in society. I don't know, they're not really well-bred. That's just their opinion of it.
Yeah, well educated maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but
More
it's
education.
to do with their family tree, their lineage,
Okay.
and where they come from. Yeah, they come from good families. They always say good families, don't they?
Yeah.
It means they got money, basically. They're no better than any other family.
They're wealthy families.
Yeah, I'm just using the common vocabulary that's used to describe these things.
Yeah.
They say he comes from a very good family, but what they mean is he comes from a wealthy family.
Yeah.
So they often say someone is well-bred. In my opinion, they're often interbred or inbred. Inbred, interbred are the same. And that's when they don't have a lot of variation in their ancestry. When cousins marry cousins,
Like the royal family.
like the royal family, are very inbred, yes. And that's why in recent years they've been marrying
Outsiders.
outsiders, marrying comparatively common people. That's because they need some new blood in the family, you see. So that's inbred. And then there's a phrase, born and bred. We often use that if you come from a town and you've spent all your life in that town, you can say, I'm Bilbao, born and bred. They say born and bred. And it means you started here, you spent all your life here. Bread, and it sounds the same as bread that you eat, but it's spelt without an A. Okay, so that was the interesting word for this week. Now, so the topic for the week was, well, it's supposed to be farming. People spent a lot of time talking about an American president. I did put a sign on the wall to try to dissuade people from this conversation, but it just encouraged people to talk about that. So we tried to stay on the topic of farming. So we were talking about when farming started, where it started, and the effects of it. The Neolithic period is marked by the discovery of farming. And it's about 10,000 years ago, in a place called the Fertile Crescent, which is sort of round about Turkey, somewhere north of Syria, somewhere around there. And it's very important. And many reasons why it happened, and many advantages that they had. And one of the advantages was the animals that were available for domestication. The European animals, we had horses, cows, pigs and goats that were all ready for domestication. Whereas in Africa, you can't domesticate African animals. And the theory is that as mankind came from Africa, the animals there have evolved alongside man, and they know that people are not particularly nice and they don't like people, whereas European animals evolved separately and men arrived later. Mankind arrived later. So apparently if you catch a wild horse, there's a certain percentage of wild horses which will bite you and kick you, but a lot of them don't. If you catch a zebra, they bite you and kick you, all of them. And you can't really domesticate zebras. Some people have trained a zebra. Occasionally they've managed to train a zebra, but you can't domesticate them. Same with elephants. And of all those animals, none of the domesticated animals we have today have their origins in Africa, even though there are like wild buffaloes and all these things that you'd think would be domesticated, but they never were. And even all the cows and all the goats and things that you see in Africa now are all come European imports later on. When farming spread from its original location, the animals went with it.
Really makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah. And of course in South America they only had llamas, and they're not particularly useful because they're not strong. They're good for wool if you want to make a nice colourful poncho, for example. Yeah, you got good wool for that, very good wool. But they can't carry much. They're not particularly strong, and you can't sit on one and ride it, and you can't make them work on the land. They can't really pull much. So Europeans had all the advantages as far as animals are concerned. So we spoke a bit about the origins of farming, and then we got on to why it was important in our evolution of human culture. So many things, I have lots of notes here, all the different things that happened, and the more we thought about it, the more consequences there were. So one thing, you had stability.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as you start farming, you stop moving.
Yeah.
Everybody used to be nomadic. People think of nomadic people as just wandering aimlessly around, but they tended to go in circles, really. Because the nomadic people in North America, if they went somewhere and all of the salmon, there's certain seasons when the salmon are going up the rivers, the salmon run as it's called, they would have known that in this season there's loads of fish, and then they stop, and so they moved on.
Yeah.
But they'd know that next year we'll make sure we're back in the same place at the same time of year. Yeah. So they tended to have a route that they took that followed the same pattern every year. So there was a primitive form of farming as well, because some North American tribes had peach trees. I can't remember where they were, somewhere further south, whether it was down near Louisiana, somewhere down there. There were wild peaches, And people always arrived at the time of year when the peaches were ready. But the other thing they would do was cut down any other trees or plants that were growing nearby to help the peach trees, because it was like they knew the peach trees were useful. So they sort of did a kind of farming, but only temporary. They sort of helped the peach trees along while they were there, and then they were left to their own devices for the rest of the year. And in lots of places in like the middle of the jungle in the Amazon or in Papua New Guinea, if someone goes out, if you need some wood to build your house or to light a fire, and you've got one tree that grows loads of fruit and another tree that doesn't grow fruit, you're going to cut down the one with no fruit because you know the other one's got other uses.
Yes.
So around the places where people live, there tend to be a lot more useful trees with food growing on them.
Yeah.
And it's not really farming, but it's a sort of a halfway towards farming.
Yeah.
And even if you went off collecting fruit, if you had to go some distance, you bring the fruit back to where you live. And those seeds are going to stay fairly local.
Yeah.
They're going to go out in the rubbish and that, and you're going to end up with lots of useful plants growing near where you live.
Yeah. And you're not going to go very far, are you?
Well, it just means you don't have to travel very far. After the next time you go out looking for fruit, it's all going to be, after a while, you'll have a lot of fruit trees growing near where you live.
Yeah.
Just because of the amount of seeds you've been bringing back from other places. Yeah. So there was a kind of farming before farming was discovered, really. It wasn't overnight, as some people say it is. Anyway, the benefits of farming. Yeah. So you got stability. So people didn't move. You had a stable structures, and you were able to make villages and then towns. And because people weren't moving, they then had possessions. Because if you're nomadic, you can't really own a lot of things because you've got to take them with you.
Yeah.
Imagine if we moved house every few months. I don't think we'd be carrying quite as many things with us. You know, we collect an awful lot of stuff, don't we, in our houses these days. But if we had to get up and move every few months, we'd soon get rid of our possessions, wouldn't we?
Oh, yeah.
So people had possessions. You had stable food supplies, which kind of had advantages and disadvantages. You had more security, that you knew where the food was going to be coming from, generally. But people tended to get dependent on fewer crops.
Yeah.
They tended to eat the same quite a lot, apparently. They've studied the skeletons and teeth and things, and they said their diets were worse when they moved into cities or when they started to settle down.
Yeah, it makes sense, I think.
But generally, you were more guaranteed to have a steady supply of food. And you could keep food and store it, and you could provide for the winter months or whatever.
Yeah.
And then you also have the specialisation of jobs, because not everybody, you don't have to wake up every morning and think, let's go looking for food. You then have people who are in charge of farming, and then you could do whatever you were particularly good at, and then you could trade your skills for food.
Yeah.
Which meant that the technological advances within that field that you were working in, you could then specialise and become better at it and learn more about it. So you had all the metalworking and things like that evolved. And then if people were trading products and things like that and skills, then it would get to a point where you'd have to have money. Because if you were building someone a house and they paid you in 10,000 eggs, like it wouldn't be particularly useful.
No, really. Yeah.
So as soon as the economy got to a certain size, then money comes into it. So money has to come about, and as soon as you've got money, you've got taxes, which brings all these mathematical changes. You've got to learn about mathematics and arithmetic and all that kind of stuff. And if you've got tax, you've got tax inspectors and hierarchies. And again, if you were out just as a nomadic tribe, there might be the leader of the tribe, but he's not going to have any, his life is going to be pretty much the same as everyone else's. They just get up and wander around and look for food and go hunting and things like that. But once you've got the settled civilizations, you've got that hierarchy where you've got the king or the pharaoh or the president or whatever he's called at the top. And He just collects the money from the working people. So you've got that class differences appear, tax systems. Land ownership was a good one that someone pointed out. The concept of owning land wouldn't have been around before then.
Yeah.
So organised religion was another one that someone came up with. Religion changed quite a lot because in the more primitive cultures, they tend to see the world as being full of spirits of the weather and the trees and the
more
rivers.
nature.
It's more nature orientated.
Yeah.
But when civilizations started, they tended to go for the, like, especially monotheism, when you got one god, who's suddenly really interested in people and what people are doing. And he's like, you know, watching you doing everything all the time. In some other cultures, they don't have that concept. The gods are out there in the forests and things like that. They don't care about who's in the bed with you. You know, like I don't know why gods these days are so interested in what you're doing in bed. Like, leave me alone. Stop watching. Look the other way. So you've got hierarchies, and if you've got money and wealth, then you're going to have jealousy. Or envy. You're going to be envious of other people's possessions, which wouldn't have happened before. I guess you would have had jealousy. We could do a what's the difference here. Envy and jealousy are very similar, aren't they? Envy is more to do with possessions, I think. Because jealousy can be more emotional. If you see your girlfriend talking to another man, you might be jealous. Yeah, but you're not envious. You're envious of his car or something like that. So if you've got possessions and wealth and hierarchies, then you've got envy, which in a hunter-gathering community, you wouldn't have that because nobody's got anything. And if you've got envy, you'd have wars and fights and that kind of thing of one settlement trying to take the stuff from the other settlement.
But I guess when in the past they had also wars between different tribes, for example, but they were already tribes when they.
Yeah, it would have been.
They were organized.
Yeah, they've always been there. Yeah, but I think they were quite trivial things.
Yeah.
There are lots of places where they had very ceremonial battles, where they sort of all line up on a hill and they sort of throw things at the other, and as soon as somebody gets injured, they go, stop. You've hurt somebody, and they all go home for a couple of days, and we'll see you next week. And they go back and do it, and there's lots of shouting and posturing and things like that.
Yeah.
It's in that book. I got that book by that John Keegan, The History of Warfare, describes a lot of the styles of warfare in different tribes, and a lot of it is very ceremonial. So they probably would have done that, yeah. Because there was enough space, if you think about it.
Yeah.
As populations grew, you got a shortage of land and a shortage of space, and commodities and things were important, weren't they? You know. So then you're going to have things to fight about.
Yeah.
But if there were very few people in the world and a lot of forest,
you
know, if you met someone, you're probably quite pleased to see somebody else. Unless they were a particular threat. So you got maths and writing would appear. As soon as you got tax, you have to know who owns what and who owes what to who. Writing appeared. So the diets were more stable, but they could have been more vulnerable to pests and diseases, especially if you're eating, most of what you eat is the same thing.
Yeah.
If there was a problem with it, it could be a big disaster because you've got no alternative food supply to go to. Also, the diseases would have gone through this populations faster if everyone's packed together in a town.
Yeah.
If you're just wandering around, it's probably more difficult to get contact with other people and get infected from other people's illnesses. And of course, we lived closer to our animals.
Yeah.
So lots of animal diseases swapped over into people. So all the flus and things like that, which were originally pig diseases, I think.
Yeah.
They transferred over and created new diseases. So that might have been a problem, at least to begin with. And maybe leisure as well. Maybe there was leisure activities as well. Because if certain people are in charge of the food, and again you've got the hierarchies in society, maybe leisure was invented then. So loads of things came about just because there was farming. changed the world. Changed the world. The agricultural revolution, as it was called. And then there was another one in the 18th century when they invented farm implements and things like that. The seed drill and all that was invented, and there was another, what was called the agrarian revolution. When I was at school, we studied it as the agrarian, which means agricultural. So very important, farming.
Yeah.
So here's a question: would you like to be a farmer?
To be honest.
Yeah, be honest. You can be honest.
I don't think so.
No, nobody wants to be a farmer, so we should appreciate where our food comes from, really,
I do.
because nobody wants to do it.
It's very hard
Yeah.
life. Even with technology these days.
Well, it's just such a full-time job. You don't get days off. The weekend isn't the weekend, really.
Yeah.
But for farmers, there are very few things in the year that they have to look forward to, because they can't really go on holiday anywhere. Unless you're very well organised and you could get people to take over the farm for a couple of weeks, but that's not really feasible for most people.
Yeah.
And if you got dairy cows, we were discussing dairy cows, those that produce milk, you have to get up every morning and milk the cows
Yeah.
every day of the year. There's no way around it. It has
Yeah.
to be done. Christmas Day, you're out there, same time,
Yeah.
every morning. Doesn't matter if it's your birthday.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you've got a hangover.
Yeah.
7 o'clock every morning, you're milking cows.
Yeah.
That's what you do. And then again at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hard life.
And this is why when we go to the like the North Devon show and things like that, where all the farmers get together and look at each other's sheep and talk about cows and things like that, for them it's a big event.
Yeah.
It's still kind of work because they're still discussing who's going to buy whose sheep and things like that. But those sort of social functions are very important for farming communities,
Yeah.
because a lot of them don't get much contact with other people, even in the
Yeah.
really remote farms.
Yeah.
They're with their family, and it's probably, the neighbour is over the other side of the hill, sort of thing, and they might not see them more than a couple of times a year.
I find that very hard, I think.
Which we'll come back to in isolation. We got isolation coming up in Unit 10, I think. So we'll be discussing farmers again in Unit 10, I think. So what about having a small holding then? Small holding and being self-sufficient. That sounds much more fun, doesn't it?
Yeah. Maybe now they should promote that in small villages that are empty.
I think farming's harder if you've got animals.
Yeah.
I think if you're growing vegetables, you can get away for the day, and
Yeah.
they're not going to worry too much, are they?
Yeah.
If you've got a field full of potatoes,
Yeah.
they're not going to die if you go away for the weekend. But it'd be much more fun, yeah. Growing vegetables would be nice, yeah. Having a vegetable patch. Back to that word patch again. Vegetable patch, and I'd like some chickens as well. Because as you know, I love chickens. They're a great animal. Wonderful creatures. Anyway, so that was our discussion this week on farming. Next week we got quite a simple one on clothes.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a big topic, clothes. I don't know what we're going to be doing, fashions and the fashion industry and how important it is to be smart at certain occasions.
You have much to say there, will you?
I don't think I'll have much to say. No, I'm sure somebody will take over the conversation for me.
Farm is more your topic.
I think I know more about farms than clothes, really. Or we could talk about farmers' clothes.
Yeah.
Uniforms. We might discuss uniforms. That's a good topic. Anyway, next week is clothes, and that's all we have time for this week. That's our what's the difference? That's our interesting word, and that's at least part of the discussion on farming. So hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next time. Have a good week. Till next week. Bye.
Bye.